This episode is made possible by our generous patrons.
Welcome to episode 119 of the Ink to Film podcast, where we read the book
And then see the movie.
I'm James.
And I'm Luke.
And this week we discuss Dr. Seuss's 1957 children's book, How the Grinch Stole Christmas, and the 2000 Ron Howard film of the same name. Okay, happy holidays, everyone. Christmas time around here, whatever you celebrate, Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, happy all of those things.
Yeah.
How's everybody doing? How are you doing? I guess you guys can't respond back, so I don't know why I asked that.
Well, they can. You just can't hear them.
Yeah.
But you can maybe you could feel their energy as everyone's having hopefully a good holiday. Yeah,
cheer.
I'm doing well. Feeling festive. I got some Christmas lights strung up behind me for this recording, so we can get in the mood. We are a non-denominational podcast. We welcome people who celebrate whatever or don't celebrate anything. If it's any consolation, I personally celebrate sort of a more pagan version of Christmas, much like the Who's of Whoville, who I noticed also have zero Christian iconography in their Christmas decorations. I don't know if you picked that up.
Oh, yeah. I thought for a second, you were going to say in general, like all of these projects. And I was like, I picked up some pretty heavy biblical stuff in the 2000 film, but we'll talk about it.
Really? Okay. Yeah. Maybe there's some in the 2000 film. I guess I wasn't looking as closely.
Just to throw it out there, they're referring to the good book a whole lot, and I just assumed that was kind of.
But it's the good book of like the Who's or whatever. But yeah,
it just
you're right.
Seems like
that could be
an allegory.
Yeah, sure. That's a good point. Yeah, and that's not in the other versions. So we should say we read the book, which was a quick, easy read children's book. Then we watched the 1966 original animated film. It's like a television film. That was on our poll. It didn't win, but we wanted to go ahead and watch that because it seemed to have a lot of important history for this project. And then we watched the 2000 Jim Carrey, Ron Howard film, which was pretty bonkers, which I had never seen before. So I'm excited to get into that when we get there.
Yeah, I knew you were going to feel that way because it's just like, it's quite a movie. It's really something.
Is. This also gave me an opportunity to really delve into Dr. Seuss and his biography, and I got a bunch of like fun facts for you I'm going to hit you with.
Yeah, I don't know much, so I really want to get some juicy details. All I've heard is that like he's maybe not the best person, and I don't even know why. It's just something that I've heard. Yeah, I thought there's something
interesting. There's only like one thing I can think of that I found that might back that up, but the majority of the stuff would not seem to go that way. So
okay,
definitely a weird guy, as you probably could guess from his art. But it'll be interesting. We'll get into that. I guess before we really get into anything, I do want to do a couple of announcements for the podcast, some bookkeeping type stuff. First off, we are going to be recording a bonus episode very soon for the Watchmen HBO series. It's not going to be a real deep dive because we're just doing a one-off bonus, but it is going to be our reactions to the show. It just finished. I don't know when you're listening to this, but if you listened to it recently, the show just wrapped up, and we have thoughts. We want to take a chance to share them. So if you're not a patron already, definitely check out our Patreon if you want to get access to that. That'll be coming out probably pretty soon. I don't know, the next few days. And we are also going to be doing our Last Looks 2019. That's going to be our next episode. However, for those of you who don't know, it's sort of a look back at the year that was. We're going to look back at all of our projects that we covered in 2019, books and films and TV. And we usually list like what our what standouts were, what our least favorites were, stuff like that, just to kind of grab bag of different topics. It's a nice kind of relaxed fit episode that we'd like to end the year with. It's not going to be coming out, however, next Thursday, like usual. It'll be coming out a little closer to the 31st. We're not sure exactly what day we're going to get it out. But yeah, don't look for that on Thursday. It'll be a little bit delayed, basically because I'm flying to Florida and we're going to be really, really busy for a little while. And it's probably not going to come out until I get back. So anyway, just look for that a little later. And then the only other housekeeping note I had a short story that recently got published. It was in a Portland magazine called the Buckman Journal. It's Buckman Journal issues 3. They are a local literary magazine in the Portland area that they publish Portland writers, and they use like Portland artists to pair with the writers and like have a bunch of cool art in the book. It's a really nice looking magazine. Only available in physical copy. You can't get an ebook. But yeah, there you can find them online if anyone's interested. My story is sort of a cosmic horror thing that I'm excited about, and hopefully people will read.
Congratulations, man. I'm excited to read it. I'm going in very dark because I haven't wanted any details. I want to just go in and read it
right,
fresh and just not know anything. So I'm really looking forward to it. I did see some photos, I will say, of sort of the typography and like some of the images that went along with your story that looked really, really freaking cool. So congrats.
Yeah.
Man.
Yeah, I was very glad when I saw how it turned out because it looks great. And yeah, thank you. And yeah, so hopefully people, if they're curious about it, can check that out. But let's get into How the Grinch Stole Christmas and Dr. Seuss. I want to first start out by asking you what your relationship is to Dr. Seuss and the books, or the cartoons, or any of that. Growing up, was he a big influence? Did you read a lot of that stuff, or was that something you kind of missed?
I don't think there's any way that you can miss Dr. Seuss, like the Cat in the Hat stuff. I just think that it's ever present. So like I didn't miss it, but it wasn't like the only thing I would read or anything like that. You know, like it wasn't a situation where like I had every single Dr. Seuss book on my bookshelf or anything like that. But I definitely, you know, like Green Eggs and Ham, I think everyone knows and has seen.
It's typically some of the first books you ever read. You know,
yeah.
That's kind of what they're designed to be.
Right. Red Fish, Blue Fish pops into my mind. I don't know if that's a book itself or if that's like a part from one of his stories, but
I think so. He has over 60 children's books, as far as I know. So I think that is one of them.
I really quickly wanted to ask you, just like, there's something about the sameness of his stories. They're like they're always very weird, but at the same time, they're children's novels, so I guess it's to be expected. But do you think that there's something? I don't know. I'll be interested to hear kind of about the guy and everything, because I feel like you could look at it cynically and be like, well, it's kind of the same thing over and over, just like slightly different, and the rhymes are cool and interesting, and that's kind of what hooks you into it in the artwork. But I feel like a lot of them blend together because they're so similar to me. But maybe it's just because I'm not as steeped in Dr. Seuss lore as I should be.
Yeah, that's interesting. I haven't really heard that, but I mean, I think it's true. But on the other hand, you could say that he has such a unique style that people have tried to emulate and failed. You know what I mean? Like he is so quintessentially Dr. Seuss, and it's iconic at this point that if you have this iconic style, and he's literally selling millions and millions of copies of these books, like he's going to stick with it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I guess, so, and like, that's not to say that I don't think the guy's a genius. Like clearly he's doing the artwork as well. Yes or no?
Yeah.
Yeah. So like the guy's absolutely like unfathomably creative, you know, like he's like, you see his images and stuff, which brings up I don't know about your copy of How the Grinch Stole Christmas, but was yours in black and white?
Yeah. Yeah, it's black and white with some red. It has some red.
Yeah. That's exactly what I read. So did that bring to mind Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark for you?
No, it didn't, but I can see how it might.
It totally did for me. A lot of it like looked very like, I don't know, it's like the sort of stringy art that he has that's like I don't know, spindly and like and
he reminded you of David Gamble, is that his name? Or Stephen Gamble? Stephen Gamble? I'm
not sure.
One of the two.
Yeah, I don't know. It's just like that reminded me. And maybe the shading, like a lot of dark shading and everything like that.
Well, for me, Dr. Seuss was definitely very big for me growing up. My favorite book of his was a book called There's a Wocket in My Pocket.
Oh yeah, I'm familiar.
Did you ever read that one?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know why, because I went back and read it because when we were covering this, because I was curious, and it's okay. It doesn't really stand out as like, why was this my favorite? I don't know.
It's just a nice rhyme. It just gets so stuck in your head. It was
nice little like word games almost, right? And I liked that, and it was playful. I definitely read Yertle the Turtle, and all the ones you've mentioned, and many others. I didn't read all of them because I was looking at the list. There's a lot, but I definitely hit a lot of the big ones, and I liked his stuff. And I think it was kind of a phase that eventually I kind of outgrew it and stopped reading it. But for a while, when I was that target audience, that target age, Dr. Seuss was very big for me. And I do remember watching the Christmas specials, and specifically How the Grinch Stole Christmas, growing up, because it's been on the air every year for many, many years now, basically, right after it first started airing. And I think it's an iconic thing that a lot of people grew up with. So I'm glad that we're going to cover that a little bit as well.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely caught that growing up, that and like the Frosty the Snowman sort of claymation thing that they have. There's like all those Christmas like animated film things that come on TV.
Yeah, that's not Dr. Seuss, but yeah, I know what you mean.
It's just like that sort of Christmas. I'm sure there's like a Charlie Brown Christmas.
Yeah, they would play like Christmas. A bunch of those in a row, right, on certain channels, and you just put it on in the Christmas time and just have it on in the background.
Yeah, Rudolph. I know there's a Rudolph one. There's so many.
Absolutely. All right, man. Are you ready to get into it? Are we ready to talk about the Grinch, a.k.a. an atheist, communist, vegan with a heart condition and poor insulation in his home?
Is that your interpretation of it?
That was my modern adult eyes looking at it. I can defend each of those claims.
That's awesome. Recite it again. What do we got?
The Grinch, an atheist, communist, vegan with a heart condition and poor insulation in his home.
How is he a communist? Why is he a communist?
Because he is very anti-consumerism. The consumerism of Christmas bothers him.
Okay.
He does not like Christmas being bought in a store. He thinks it's all about the presents. Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's a total communist.
Well, until the end.
He's a vegan because he doesn't like roast beast. That's my only real way I can defend that. But he never eats it. He cuts it at the end, but he never eats it. So he's kind of he's bending a little and he's cutting it for people, but he's not eating it himself. And I went with atheist because doesn't celebrate Christmas. Maybe that has something to do with it. Mm-hmm. Maybe he just doesn't like religious celebrations of any kind. Obviously, the guy has a heart condition, right? Like if your heart's 3 sizes too small or whatever, like you're in trouble. And then it's going to expand rapidly. It's all bad. He's got swelling feet that make his shoes too tight. That's probably a symptom of his heart condition.
Right. Isn't that diabetes related? Like there's something with your feet?
Probably, man. Yeah, maybe he's diabetic. Yeah. Tack that on there too. Yeah. I felt kind of bad for the guy, honestly, until he did. There are some things he does to make sure that you view him as a villain. But
I'm not a huge fan of the dog, of how he treats his dogs. But
oh yeah, we'll get into that. Yeah, Max gets some rough treatment. So let me tell you about Theodore Suess Geisel. He is an American children's author, political cartoonist, illustrator, poet, animator, screenwriter, and filmmaker. He is known for his work writing and illustrating more than 60 books under the pen name Dr. Seuss. His work includes many of the most popular children's books of all time, selling over 600 million copies and being translated into more than 20 languages by the time of his death. He was born in 1904 and died in 1991. The guy, I learned a bunch of fun facts about him, honestly, and I'm ready. I'm excited to get into them, and I guess I'll just have you kind of react to each one.
Yeah,
because a lot of them are pretty fun. Yeah, let me give you one now. Yertle the Turtle is a story about his feelings about authoritarian rule and fascism and the dangers of it.
Nice. Okay, so if he's threading in these sort of allegories, and maybe I need to come back on some of the stuff I said earlier. I didn't really put it through any sort of lens like that. If he was actually trying to make political commentaries and things like that.
Yeah, I should probably have ordered these in some sort of chronological order to give you a view of his life, because Yertle the Turtle is written a little later. So one of the other fun facts is that he sort of worked with the military. I don't know if he officially served, but he was in a division of the military that made U.S. propaganda films about the Axis powers. And while he was there, he met Chuck Jones, the animator who would go on later to do How the Grinch Stole Christmas with him, who is the guy who is the creator of Looney Tunes.
That's crazy. So that's awesome.
Together they worked in the propaganda division of like the military, making anti-Axis power propaganda films, which he actually won like a bunch of awards for, the one that he made.
Wow. I mean, what's crazy is that there's tons out there about the Looney Tunes in general, and like the sort of impact that the Looney Tunes have had, and like the way that animation was, I don't know, and that has become iconic on its own. And like for those two to come together and work on something like this is crazy. And for them to have done propaganda films in general, like maybe that says something about the sort of animation that the Looney Tunes was going for and stuff. Like I wonder if it, like, I'm sure there's tons baked into a lot of that seemingly more childish content.
Well, and I think the movies were live action, but I don't quote me on that. I'm not certain. I saw some clips in some of the videos I watched, but I'm not sure if they were just showing random clips or if they were showing actual clips of the film. I wasn't clear, but it appeared to be live action. So speaking of live action, he also made a movie. Dr. Seuss wrote and directed his own film. It is called The 5,000 Fingers of Dr. T. And it was a bizarre film that came out and was panned. Everyone hated it. He considered it a personal failure and vowed to never make another film. It is now celebrated as a bizarre cult classic, which probably doesn't surprise you.
I thought you were going to be like, it is now part of the Criterion Collection or something.
Yeah. No, it's a movie about a kid who falls asleep during a piano recital or lesson, and he has a nightmare about being trapped in a world with this like evil doctor who has like hundreds of kids who are like enslaved, and they each have to play a certain key on a keyboard, and it's bizarre where there's weird costumes that everyone wears. And the acting is really crazy and over the top. Really weird film. As bizarre as it sounds, it is that bizarre. And I kind of want to see it now.
Yeah.
Maybe we could do it as a bonus episode. That would be
crazy.
Fun.
Yeah, I'd be down.
I mean, apparently it's bad, but it would be fun just to see that, I think. And apparently Sideshow Bob is actually named after, I forget what it is, but like the Dr. T... It's short for something like Theodore or something that is apparently also part of Sideshow Bob's name. And it was like an inspiration from The Simpsons.
Wow.
Who were specifically referencing this movie.
Yeah, that's crazy. The Simpsons go deep. If you want some deep film cuts, like they just like always have done it. And they're like, they're horror episodes. They're, what's it called? Treehouse of Horror stuff. Have you ever watched any of those?
Oh yeah. Dude,
amazing stuff. Yeah,
those
amazing.
Are great. Yeah, those were my favorite. I wasn't huge into The Simpsons, but I always caught those. Like that was a must watch, and I'm talking like in the '90s when The Simpsons was at its heyday. Although I've heard people say it's like come back. I don't know. I just haven't checked it out much recently. Anyway, you ready for another fact?
Yes.
So Dr. Seuss basically invented the word nerd. It first appeared in his book called If I Ran the Zoo, and within a year of its publication, it began being used as a slang for someone who's a square.
Wow. I feel like I'd heard that before, but totally forgot. That's so weird.
He had a creature. It was called like a nerd, and it was like in the zoo. It was in like a list.
He's like
of
Shakespeare.
creatures.
He like creates words, right?
Well, speaking of that, the Grinch. A Grinch to mean a person who is anti-Christmas literally comes from this book. It was not used that way before he actually used the word Grinch in two previous works of his, but I think that this is what popularized it.
Wow.
But yeah, that term did not mean that before Dr. Seuss.
Well, I kind of figured that one, but you know what I am interested in is this sort of connected universe that he has built up. Like I want to does he have like a Stephen King or like a Marvel Cinematic Universe of built up material where everything crosses over and it's all part of the same thing?
I've heard that some of his animated movies, I believe, and some of the modern takes reference other Dr. Seuss projects, but I don't know how much of that was like in the actual books themselves. I'm not certain about that, but yeah, it would be cool if that was true. So, Green Eggs and Ham. I'm going right into another fact.
Go for it.
Green Eggs and Ham is the fourth biggest selling English language book of all time, and he wrote it to win a bet with his publisher. His publisher bet him $50 that he wouldn't be able to write a children's book using only 50 different words. And that's what he did.
So that's why it's so repetitive. That's why it's green eggs. Yeah. No, I do not like green eggs and ham.
Yeah. There's only 50 words in the entire book. It's specifically designed to be teaching children how to read, you know, when they don't know very many words at all. And it's supposed to teach you some vocabulary, nothing too difficult. It's about a bunch of simple words, you know.
Wow.
And it was after the success of The Cat in the Hat, which I believe has, I didn't write it down, but I think it's like 150 different words, only 150 different words. And so the publisher was like, well, if you thought that was hard, I bet you can't do 50. And he did.
Wow.
And the fourth biggest selling English language book of all time came out of that.
That's
pretty wild. Right?
And like, you have to assume like that is insane. That's got to be worth like just an insane amount of money, right?
Oh yeah, man. I mean, he was super wealthy. Like after his books took off, not immediately, So he actually started writing when he was pretty young. I think a lot of his early books came out when he was like in his 20s. But his popularity really took off after World War II was over. The 50s and 60s is where he really hit his stride and became very, very popular. Even before that, one of my other fun facts is that he actually wrote a bizarre illustrated book for adults about the 7 naked women who were called the 7 Lady Godivas. And the premise of the book was that they were unable to marry until they warned men about the dangers of horses. And it is, according to the video I saw, it is as bizarre and nonsensical as it sounds. And he really struggled to. He said he struggled to draw the women. He didn't know where their knees went. He said, and the pictures of the women are pretty out there. It's a weird book. I definitely look it up. It looks like Dr. Seuss, but they're like naked women, so it's very odd. It's not like super obscene naked women, but it is, it's something else. Anyway, he says that that was the last time. He said that was a personal failure, and he said that after that experience, he was never going to write for adults again. Quote, "Adults are obsolete children, and to hell with them."
That's a sick line. That's awesome.
Yeah, I thought it was fun, and it's one of his only books that is out of print. So yeah, there's a lot of fun facts about this guy. So I'm going to go all the way back because this is kind of an origin story for him. Like I said, I didn't put these in order, so I'm kind of jumping around. But when he was young, during World War I, he was of German heritage. Like his father migrated over and was, I think, a brewer. And he was in the Boy Scouts of America, and he was constantly being ridiculed for having German heritage because of World War I had broken out. And so there was this practice where the Boy Scouts would go around selling war bonds to help with the war effort. And he sold $1,000 worth of war bonds to his grandfather in an attempt to show his patriotism. Mm-hmm. Selling $1,000 worth of war bonds made him one of the top-selling scouts in the city. I forget where this was. And so the Boy Scouts of America put on a big thing where they invited then former President Theodore Roosevelt to give out medals to the highest-selling war bond selling Boy Scouts, right? So the top 10 highest selling boys came on stage, stood in a line. Dr. Seuss, who is not actually a doctor, and Seuss is his middle name, but regardless, he was at the end of the line. They accidentally only gave Roosevelt 9 medals. So he gave out 9 medals, and then when he got to Dr. Seuss, he looked him in the eye and said, "What is this boy doing here?" And the Boy Scout master came out, apologized, took him off stage. He never received a medal, and it was a huge embarrassment that made him terrified of public speaking for the rest of his life.
Wow. That is insane. I thought it was going to be a happy story. That is
no,
crazy.
he did any public appearances because of
Did
this.
he say, he said, why is he here because of his German heritage?
He said, why is this boy here?
Because of his German heritage, or because he didn't
because he didn't have
a
he didn't have a 10th medal.
Okay, gotcha.
He didn't have a 10th medal, so he thought there was only going to be 9. Like
Right.
he was under the impression that he had 9 medals, there was going to be 9 kids, and then there was a 10th there, and he didn't know why. I mean, he seems like he was kind of a dick about it.
Yeah.
And then the Boy Scout leader didn't help, and then he never received the medal, and it was just this like huge embarrassing moment for him. This like former president that everybody loved, yelling at you essentially. So first off, a lot of his inspiration for his animals was his father, maybe his grandfather, would take him to the zoo, and he would draw animals like to fill his time. He would just draw all the different animals in the zoo, and so he started inventing his own animals. He would like mix and match and pull different things, right? As an adult, he got into the habit of creating taxidermied sculptures of animals because he had friends who like worked in taxidermy. So he would take real animal parts and create these bizarre mixes between real animals and like wood and plaster and paint. And he would make these wall mountings that people said it looked like he went on a hunting expedition through his own stories.
That is insane. That's so wild.
And you should definitely check out pictures of them because they're pretty bizarre looking. It's like real animal horns and stuff. It's like really weird.
Is it horrifying or does it seem creative?
Semi-horrifying, definitely creative, definitely weird. They were on the walls in his like home, and people would remark about how they were nightmarish when they would see them. Wow. Sometimes.
Yeah, I gotta look that up. That's crazy.
You can still buy apparently like remakes of them, like people like casted versions of them. Are still available online.
Wow.
Pretty fun. I'm gonna link one of the best videos I watched on this. I'll definitely link it, and maybe I'll link two. I saw another one that was like really good about his biography, but one of them where a lot of these facts came from. They were really cool. So one of the last books he wrote was a book called "Oh, the Places You'll Go," which I don't know if you've ever read that one.
Yeah, I'm familiar with that one.
He wrote that as a very old man, and a lot of people look at that as a message, literally from like an old man to a younger generation. Wow. And I think it's poignant because at that point in his life, he was single. His then wife, I don't know if it was his first or second wife, I think he had two wives, had committed suicide. And it was as a result of him having apparently a very public affair. So this is the only thing I could find that maybe would lead to what you've heard about him. Because apparently he had a very troubled home life. So I don't know. I don't know if that's the kind of thing you thought you heard about him, but that's the only thing I can think of that was kind of a negative that I could find on the guy.
No, the thing that I thought and this is just, me having heard something, but basically I just thought that he was like, I don't know, anti-Semitic or like racist or something like this.
I wonder if you maybe got mixed up with like a Walt Disney or something, because I've never heard that about Dr. Seuss, but I have heard that about Disney. So
I mean, I'm assuming I'm just mistaken. Obviously, it doesn't seem like that's in the cards here. But
unless I'm missing something that was like omitted in all the research I did, and there is something like that, I didn't find any of that.
Gotcha. It's all how people are though. Like I'm sure in the same way that people are like Mr. Rogers is like a piece of shit deep down. Like that's a facade on like people lie.
Mr. Rogers is an angel, a non-denominational angel.
People will do anything to like bring people like that down though. So I'm assuming it's probably just something that somebody said about Dr. Seuss and it just stuck in my brain.
Yeah, maybe. Well, get it out, because it's not true.
It's not true, apparently.
Unless someone writes in and tells us it is. I don't know, maybe. Anyway, but speaking of his personal life, him and his wife were unable to have children. I think biologically unable to. And so he was famously had no kids, yet he was writing all these children's novels, which is interesting because I think we also had that with Where the Wild Things Are creator, right? Like he also didn't have any children.
Right?
And
Maurice Sendak.
Yeah, Maurice Sendak, yeah. So yeah, I don't know. I think it's interesting that you have a couple of these like very prominent children's books writers who didn't have any children. But what he did, which is kind of weird, is he invented actually several, but prominently one fictional child that he actually dedicated one of his books to. Her name was Chrysanthemum Pearl. And he had like an age for her. He had like likes and dislikes. He talked about how she could make this like mean stew and like all this stuff. Like he would talk about her in public, but she was completely fictional. So people often theorize that he had this like deep sadness about it, and maybe really did want to have children but couldn't. So I don't know. There's maybe some underlying sadness there potentially.
I mean, it seems. I think that like if you look at somebody's career like that, and you find out about that information, I think there has to be some sort of connection.
Well, and speaking of that, I think it's a good way to transition into some more about the Grinch in particular, where it is said that a lot of people who look at it, and he even I think admitted to this at one point, that the Grinch is based off of himself.
Oh.
And when he wrote it, he was 53 years old, which is the age of the Grinch in the story. He lived on a mountain. It was outside of I think a suburb in California, I believe. Anyway, it overlooked this like ritzy suburb, and he was up on this mountain home. And like I said, had no children. So in the holidays, he would probably feel this sort of Grinchy attitude. Mm-hmm. And I don't know. I just think it's interesting that apparently he kind of self-inserted him into this book. It's also the first book he wrote where the protagonist was both an adult and a villain, or actually either an adult or a villain, both in this one book, which actually is pretty interesting. You think about it, like very rare for that to be true.
Yeah, I wonder what it says about the fact that at the end of the story, the Grinch is, reformed and like his heart grows 3 sizes or whatever. And he's like, right. he embraces Christmas and understands it's not about the gifts and all that kind of thing. I wonder if that's him saying like that was a realization that he had and like a lesson. Obviously it's a lesson he wants to pass on, but like something that he doesn't identify with the Grinch any longer, but maybe he did at one point.
Yeah, I think so. I think all of that is true. So I want to get your thoughts on this animated movie, and I'll hit you with one quick fact. Did you know that Boris Karloff, you probably saw in the credits, that's pretty cool that he did the voice of the Grinch. So what you might not have known is that the guy who sings the song, There's a Mean One, Mr. Grinch, is the same guy who voiced Tony the Tiger.
No, I definitely did not know that. It's funny.
Yeah.
I assumed that it was Boris.
Nope, he doesn't sing, apparently, so they had to bring in somebody else to do it.
Gotcha. I mean, my thoughts on the animated film are just that it's very clearly iconic. I look at hand animation now like so differently than I used to, and I'm just so blown away by it. And I know that there's something like, I think there's something imperfect about like hand drawn animation that is just like so missing in so much animation today, and that's clearly animation is at an all-time high with the sort of the feats that they can pull off. But I don't know, there's something very classic and very like warm and homey about this, and the animation, I think it has something to do with it, and the voices, and just like the weird and like that moment where the Grinch smiles and like his hair curls and everything, and that's like, you can't recreate that. It's that was just like some crazy moment that someone was able to draw that. And I don't know, I think it's an iconic movie. I think because I'm so familiar with the story, I really wasn't that engaged is the only thing. I think they sing, it's a lot of singing, so it's kind of a musical. Sure. It's short, but it doesn't feel that short to me. It kind of felt longer than I thought it would.
Yeah, I mean, it's a children's movie, so of course as adults we're probably going to get a little bored. But I had fun trying to read into things, determining all the little things I could about the Grinch. I think it's fun to think of him as Dr. Seuss himself, right, and kind of view the world that way.
That's crazy.
One of the things that I liked about it was I started to realize that I believe Max the dog is a sort of a audience stand-in. And that's the role he fills for this throughout, right? Like, he's the one who is like scared of the stuff that the Grinch is doing, and he kind of has this like love-hate relationship with the Grinch that I think kind of mimics our own, where we want to like this guy, but we also can tell that he's doing shit that is reprehensible. Like you mentioned, there is some abusive behavior going on here that I feel like doesn't fly these days, but I do know they still air this thing. He is quite rough with that dog.
I cynically looked at his treatment of Max as just like the easy way for a child or any audience member to just see like, this is bad Grinch and this is good Grinch. Like when Max and like when the Grinch is happy and everything's better, he like pets Max and embraces him and all these things, and like you're just supposed to forget about all the beating that went on and all these other things. But it's like, I think it's a shorthand way of saying like bad Grinch, good Grinch, and like I don't know, that's how I kept thinking of it.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right on. Yeah, I mean, he's literally whipping him throughout, like viciously whipping him to make him pull the sleigh. Like, I know it's a cartoon and it's all in fun, I guess, but it's pretty dark.
What did you think about his eyes changing color when he became good Grinch, by the way?
Right, they turned blue.
Yeah.
Right.
What does that mean?
Yeah,
Is it just like a signifier?
Yeah, I mean, they're people have pointed out they're bright red in the book. They're quite demonic. Speaking of, another little factoid. Chuck Jones, creator of Looney Tunes, came up with the idea to make the Grinch green. He originally was not green. And he apparently based it off of, there was a bunch of rental cars in the area that were, I guess green was a very popular color, and so he was like, we should make the Grinch green. That's what I saw.
Wow.
A weird reason, but apparently that's why.
I mean, it was weird to see. I think that's another reason why I felt very like Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, is that black and white Grinch was really a lot creepier than I remembered the Grinch being. Yeah, fair. So yeah, I mean, we're gonna get into the story. I mean, I think we're all familiar with it, right? Like we all know what happens in the Grinch. So I don't think we need to really go through a plot synopsis. But know that the book and the animated version are very, very similar. I think the only things they really add are some like
action sequences, I guess, for lack of a better word. Like there's a lot of like sleigh riding around, and
I consider it B-roll.
Like, oh, is it gonna fall? And
yeah,
what's that?
I just said I consider it B-roll shots of like there's like moments where he's like playing with a train when he's like, you know, the train's like going into the bag, and like when he's stealing all the things, like they do like little B-roll cut-in shots. And
so speaking of that song, there's a couple parts where he calls them different names. I can't remember exactly which one it is, but there was a few of them that were censored in the original broadcast for years because it was considered too offensive for a modern broadcast. I think it was even just like calling him mean, I think might have been censored.
You're a beep one.
Yeah. Do you remember when he's standing over all of the Who children and he has this like big smile and with all his crooked teeth?
Yep.
That whole scene was cut from the TV broadcast originally because it was considered too creepy.
Crazy.
It was pretty creepy.
Yeah, it was creepy.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have a lot less to say. I've given you lots of factoids. Oh, speaking of the animation, this was filmed at 24 frames per second. So they ended up having to produce way more cells than was typical for animated features at the time. Mm-hmm. And I saw that it was 17,000 hand-drawn cells over the course of like 6 months were made for this for this 25-minute thing. And
you, we talked about this a little bit with the Snow White stuff, but like the sort of, when we covered Snow White a little bit ago, the original Disney film, there's like this sort of like planes, the different planes of the animation where they're able to do like certain sweeping, zooming shots and going further and moving things within planes and layering the shots and everything. And there was definitely some of that going on. So it was something that I recognized because we talked about it so much in the Snow White coverage. I mean, like I said, it's just like it's such a crazy amount of work for such a short film. And it's just, and I understand why it's not done anymore. It's not quite the most efficient thing, but it does lead to, I don't know, it leads to a certain authenticity that I think, and like, that's not to take away from animation today. Cause like I said, they're clearly doing things that are like unbelievable. That couldn't even be considered possible 20, 30 years ago. But just there's something about like every once in a while seeing like a hand drawn or
is there anybody still doing hand drawn animated movies like that?
Well, I know like there was definitely some hand like that's the thing. Like, what do you consider hand drawn? Like drawn on paper, and then like or drawn like.
Because I know there's like Leica who's doing the models,
stop motion,
the 3D models, but it feels like there's not a lot of 2D.
I mean, I would point to
made these days.
I would point to like Miyazaki and like the
there you go.
That they do.
Yeah, that's true.
Like, but even so, it's the digitally augmented. But like clearly, that's the reason why I feel the authenticity is there with something that Miyazaki does,
anime,
and Studio Ghibli. But what I was saying with the Grinch specifically here, every single cell, like there's no digital, there's no such thing, and I think it's just interesting. And like you mentioned, Leica, that's part of the reason why I appreciate them so much is because like. There's some augmenting there as well in the same way that something like Miyazaki does now. But the painstaking hours and the meticulous nature of it, I think just like it's like I don't know, it's like an acrobatics act on top of making an entertaining film.
Right, and I should say I am aware there's tons of animated media out there. Like, it's very popular. I was specifically talking about like feature films.
Right.
But you're right, like Miyazaki, Studio Ghibli, and some others. That's where it's coming from these days. It seems like to me, like you go see it in a theater kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas I feel like there's just not a lot of that happening anymore these days. But I think I'm ready to get on to this movie, man. I'm gonna hand it over to you, and I want you to tell me about this film. I only saw a little bit here and there that would come up in some of these like fact videos I would watch, so I know a little bit, but not a lot.
Okay, I'll be interested to hear what you saw. I'll just start by saying this film was directed by Ron Howard, and I think everyone in the world has seen a Ron Howard film, whether you realize it or not.
Seems like it. I don't even know. Like, I can't name 10, or I can't even name like 3 or 4 Ron Howard movies. But I also know that I've seen a bunch of them, and as soon as you tell them to me, I'm gonna go like, oh yeah.
You're gonna everything that I say, you're gonna have seen. Like, I'll specifically pick the ones that everyone's seen, and then you'll be like, oh my god, it's amazing. So I wanted to start by saying like Ron Howard, clearly a very iconic director at this point. He's I think the voice of a generation of filmmakers. He's that important, I think, to sort of a lot of these films. But at the same time, I think understated and kind of underrated. A lot of people don't like talk about him as much as you would expect. He's an American filmmaker and actor. He first came to prominence as a child actor, guest starring in several television series, including an episode of The Twilight Zone. which I felt we should definitely mention. So,
Hey,
I mean, that's
former project.
So, he gained national attention for playing young Opie Taylor, the son of Sheriff Andy Taylor,
Right.
played by Andy Griffith in the sitcom The Andy Griffith Show. So clearly that's where he got his major start, and it's really fascinating to see a child star go from acting into being this generational director that he is now. Howard was cast in one of the lead roles in the coming-of-age film American Graffiti in 1973, which received widespread acclaim and became one of the most profitable films of all time. Now, do you know?
I've never seen that movie, but I've heard of it.
Do you know why the thing that I think of whenever I think of American Graffiti? Do you know what that is?
No, I know nothing.
So
about it.
American Graffiti was directed by George Lucas, and then who would go on to have this be one of the most profitable films of all time, and then would go on to basically have his opportunity to create Star Wars.
Okay.
So
wow, have you seen American Graffiti?
Yeah, I have. I mean, it's
nice.
It's a story about 1950s like hot rods and diners and things like that. It's very like
cool.
Of that time. I think you'd like it. So just to speak to him as a director now, he's an Academy Award winning filmmaker. These are some of his critically acclaimed dramas and comedies and everything that he's done. We'll go chronologically. I'll just start naming them, and I'll give you a second to react, but I'm just going to rattle a bunch off. Ready?
Yeah.
So the first one that sticks out to me is Willow, which is just like a classic.
Should I say whether I've seen it or not?
If you want to, yeah. But
I've seen that one.
Okay, so
it's been a long time, though.
Backdraft.
Seen it.
Apollo 13.
Yes.
How the Grinch Stole Christmas.
Well, of course.
A Beautiful Mind.
Yes.
Cinderella Man.
Yep.
The Da Vinci Code.
Yes.
Frost Nixon.
No, I did not see that.
Okay, that one's really good. Now we're getting into some of his more recent stuff that you may or may not have seen. Rush. This is like a Formula One race car movie.
No, I haven't seen that.
Okay. Recently, in 2018, he directed Solo: A Star Wars Story, which kind of links it back to that George Lucas thing.
Was he the guy they brought in to fix it, or was he the original director?
Oh, he was the one they brought in to fix it, yeah.
He's the one they brought in. Okay.
And when I say fix loosely, because like I've heard a lot of things about how that all went down and everything.
Right.
Lord and Miller, Phil Lord and Chris Miller, I believe, is how they go. Lord and Miller. So I think they were just going with some sort of like really bonkers. I would have liked to have seen whatever they had, just because I'd be interested to see like how crazy was too crazy.
I want to see the original Rogue One before it. I want to see the dark version of Rogue One, which we'll never probably see the light of day, but I would love to see it.
Totally, yeah. As much as I think that this is a serviceable movie, Ant-Man, I would have loved to have seen Edgar Wright's Ant-Man if we're talking about movies that the directors were changed pretty early on. Anyway.
Well, we're off on the weeds a little bit.
Yeah.
Let's focus on the movie at hand. I heard that a lot of people, like, I don't have any real memories surrounding this movie because I never saw it. But I've heard a lot of people misremember this as being directed by Tim Burton, and I can see why.
Oh yeah, I can see that. I didn't think that he directed it, but that's funny that I can totally see that. This movie was huge for me. Like when it came out, it was like the perfect time for me. I am admittedly a huge Jim Carrey fan, and even a huge Ace Ventura fan. Which is funny because like I can objectively look at those movies and understand why people won't like them. But I watched Ace Ventura when I was a young kid, when I was way too young to be watching it. And I don't know, man. It's just I found it funny then, and like some of it I still find funny today. And a lot of it is just from that charisma that Jim Carrey just like spews, this sort of comedic like it's like slapstick, but also like quick. I feel like he has that sort of improvisational mind that I don't know has gone on to create like your modern comedians and comedic movies and things like that. But admittedly, he's a very 90s like version of that.
I don't know if you know off the top of your head, but when did Ace Ventura come out?
Oh, I would say, I mean, in the 90s.
Yeah, because I felt like this was very Ace Ventura style Jim Carrey. It felt like the most Ace Ventura outside of like, I guess Liar Liar is kind of like that too, but this is very like over the top, super hammy. Like I wrote down like Jim Carrey at 1,000% is in this movie. Like he is just going for the craziest facial looks he could do through all that prosthetic and just, I don't know. It's a wild performance. I can see why this movie really divides people because, I mean, story-wise, I think it's solid. But the look of it is kind of really unsettling and off-putting. And I can see people seeing it and going like, ooh, I do not like this. The prosthetics are it's very uncanny valley a lot of the time, right? Like it's like something is just off about this face. And it doesn't help that some people have prosthetics and some people don't. And so then you start to like look for it and try and figure out why. And it's there's really no good explanation that I can see. It's a bizarre looking film. It reminded me very much of, I even said like, this is very Disney World. Like if you go to like a Dr. Seuss land in Disney, it is Disney, right? That has a Dr. Seuss land.
I'm not sure. I think it's Universal.
It felt
actually,
very.
I'm pretty sure it's
Is
Universal.
it Universal?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Okay, maybe that's what I'm thinking of. But it's very like going to an amusement park and going to a Dr. Seuss themed area. That's what it feels like you're in for this movie. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, so much to talk about here. The prosthetics are definitely bonkers, but I think admittedly, like purposely, you know what I mean? Like they're supposed to look really, I mean, I don't know if you're saying that they look bad or if they just look like really weird, but like the drawings and everything about this world was supposed to be weird looking. Which I admit it does look weird. And I still to this day will look at the noses and like be like, what? It's just like something about it is weird.
The taxidermy heads that he would do on his walls, they looked like something from this movie.
Yeah.
So it's
totally.
it's in keeping with his, like, if you take like his 2D cartoons that are like sort of fun and loving and I don't know, like weird but exciting and interesting, and you put them into 3D. It gets weird, it gets bizarre in a hurry, and that's what happens in this movie.
Yeah, like at the end of the day, do I recommend this movie to people? Is it like this amazing movie? I don't know. If you're looking for something a little like more broadly appealing, I'd go with like an Elf or something like that for a Christmas movie. For like a comedic Christmas movie.
I'm not a big Will Ferrell guy, but I've heard that movie's good. I don't think I've even seen that.
Wow, that's pretty surprising. I'm surprised. You don't like Christmas movies, apparently. You haven't seen this one.
I mean, other than Die Hard, I mean, that's my favorite Christmas. I watch that every year, but we have to watch that soon, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, I don't. I mean, Home Alone, like, which is Die Hard for children. Yeah. Apparently, I have a formula I like.
Yeah. This world, though, I mean, this world is insane. The production design of the world, like the actual, they had to create all these phones and all these weird things and all these moments, like where they have like compacting machines.
It was impressive.
And like you know, like the gun that shoots the lights and like all these crazy things. God. Like a lot of this is a lot of this is practical.
So like, I am super not the person to make this observation, but it felt like they were having a moment during that scene. The wives.
Yeah.
Like I felt big like lesbian energy going on during that. It was something else. I don't know. Go back and watch that scene. First off, there's a lot of weird sexual stuff that goes on in this movie for a kid's movie. Yeah. I was shocked.
The thing that I immediately was thinking about was like, I was like, all right, so Luke is coming into this for the first time. I'm just going to try to like watch it as like a fresh eyes, first time viewing. And I was like, there's so much innuendo. There's so much like this is for the parents and the kids are going to laugh and not understand why they're laughing. This whole movie is that. And that whole subplot with like the girl, the neighbor that the Grinch loves and always has, and part of the reason why
Martha, I think is her name, and she's the one that like it's like very sexualized throughout. She's kind of the trophy that he wins at the end, in sort of a kind of problematic way.
And he's a creep. He's a creep towards her even after she's like, yeah, I like him, and it's like, just creepy and weird.
Yeah. So anyway, that goes on. There's a point where he like lands with his face in her cleavage and then says "Hi, Martha" from her cleavage, which that was fine in the year 2000, I guess. Yeah. I don't think it was actually.
I did want to go back to that gun, that sort of like light shooting.
Yeah,
a gun.
It's like a strap-on.
They shot. Did not think you'd say that, but so the. They in order to shoot that scene, they had the device pulling lights off of the roof, and then they played it back in reverse in order to make it look like it was shooting it onto the roof, which I don't know, a fun little production thing. Apparently this was the largest set that Universal had created up to this point, like this Whoville set and everything that's in it and all the stuff we see. It's just impressive, like I like the scale of it and like how deeply they paid attention to all of these details and they hoot up every real world thing. They hooted up and made it very of the world. Can we talk about the trope? I don't know if this has a literary name or anything, or just in general, if this has a name, but what's the trope of like a small world being inside of something that's small in our world? You know what I mean?
Oh,
Like it's like, that's like a trope that like, how many times does that need? I think it's super worn out at this point, but like that's always a thing that people do, and this was one of them. And I think I can think of like Men in Black as one.
Yeah, sure. That's a very famous one. Yeah. There's a few. I think there's I can't remember. There's one where like it's like they're in a snow globe the whole time, right, or something.
Yeah, that sounds
famously.
familiar.
I can't remember which.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know them all. There are a few of those kind of things. I don't. It probably has a name if you go to like tvtropes.com or something, but I don't think it has like a very well known name. But it's like some sort of world within an object or something.
Yeah. What do you think
about it?
I
think it's fun. I think it it's funny because I'm currently writing a story that is kind of like that but different. So I think it's like anytime you have a trope, like you can take certain ideas and invert them or play with them, and I guess my story is really not like that in that sense because it's more about characters who have worlds inside their heads.
Okay.
Which is kind of the opposite of that. Like
that sounds
the
cool.
Characters are on the outside of the world. I don't know. So it's a little different, but like it feels kind of like a kinship there. So I like the idea of playing with that kind of space, though, right? Like something small inside something larger, and it's like a surprising. But I think what you're specifically disliking is probably the reveal of it. Like, ooh, this big reveal. Look, they're actually in this. Where
they didn't even do that in this one. It was the opening shot, but again, they pulled out at the end to show that it was innocent. But like the idea behind it, I think, is just like they're like. For me, it's like, what's the point of that specifically doing it at the end or the reveal or whatever of it is to be like, it was all a small thing.
Just being
at the
playful,
same time.
man.
Yeah, like
it's like, well, ooh, what's in every snowflake? If that's in that one, like there's all these worlds we can't see, and if you think about like microbes and stuff, that is kind of true. So I think it's kind of fun, but I can see why you would say it's overdone. And I think it's all about how it's handled, and like if you're trying to say something new with it versus just doing it for like a weird twist.
Yeah. So a couple things I want to talk about. One being Sir Anthony Hopkins recorded all the narration for this movie. Did you realize that was Anthony Hopkins?
I did hear that as a fact later. At the time, I wrote down, who the fuck is the narrator? Because he's super familiar, and I couldn't place him. And then when I heard it was Anthony Hopkins, I was like, of course, I don't know why I didn't place him, because like he has such an iconic voice. But
pretty cool.
Apparently, he recorded all of the lines in a single day.
I believe it. That's awesome. Good for him. Fat paycheck for a day's work.
Yep.
So let's talk about Jim Carrey more. And specifically the suit. He had to wear prosthetic contacts that were like his entire eye because they're entirely yellow, and they were like highly uncomfortable, and he hated it. And the entire suit apparently was highly uncomfortable and hot and just like miserable. And Jim Carrey he just put up with it, and he just was like, I have to do what I have to do for the movie. Oh, and there's also a ton of makeup to mention as well. Tons of makeup, tons of prosthetics, tons of suit, the contacts, everything. But so this is a funny story about that. Ron Howard was so thankful to Jim Carrey that he decided he was going to wear the suit himself for a day. And I guess Jim Carrey got to set and like saw this person and thought that it was saw Ron Howard in the Grinch costume, thinking it was his stunt double, and apparently he was upset because he was like, this guy looks nothing like me, thinking he was his stunt double. So it's like I don't know, I guess that just speaks to the funny sort of like relationship that they had, and like the fact that he was willing to put it on and deal with it. He directed an entire day of filming with the suit on.
Wow.
So I mean,
so I saw the little factoid I saw about the suit was that they had a former Navy SEAL on set to coach Jim Carrey on methods used to endure torture.
Yeah, I'd heard about that.
In order to put up with the pain of the suit, apparently, and the discomfort of the suit.
Horrifically. I'm sure it was absolute torture. I can't even, I don't think I could have done it personally.
No, dude, I get super claustrophobic about like certain things, and I think that like the inability to like take it off.
Right. Well, you can take it off, and that's the thing. Like, you
can't take it off.
You can't take it off throughout the day, but I would freak out and rip it off my face. Like I couldn't.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. I couldn't do it, man. It would be wild. Yeah. And honestly, like it looked pretty good, but I think it made the mistake that you sometimes see where it's like you're putting too much on your actor's face, so you can't see the work they're doing. Because there was so often where I felt like I really wanted to see what was going on with Jim Carrey's expressions, but it was kind of masked, and all you could really see was like the mouth and the eyes, but like a lot of what was going on with his cheeks and stuff were completely obscured. So I don't know. I was kind of mixed on how it looked, I guess.
So, I mean, in terms of like a comedian and the ad-libbing that went on, you can very much see a lot of the moments that are like Jim Carrey being Jim Carrey in this film. Apparently there's a moment where, you know the moment where he rips the blanket or whatever that he's going to use as like a kilt. He like rips it from the table and nothing moves. And he goes back over and knocks it all over. Apparently, that was like an accident. Everything was supposed to fall over when he pulled it, and he pulled it and nothing moved. And then he like went back into frame and knocked it all over. And like that was like an ad lib moment, which I don't know. It's like sort of like a physical comedy moment, and
yeah,
it
felt like there was references to Ace Ventura, but I haven't seen it in so long I can't remember. Or like other Jim Carrey movies, it seemed like he was like quoting himself at times or something. Like I don't know. There was at least 1 or 2 times where that stood out to me.
Yeah, I feel like there were moments where they were just like, Jim Carrey it up, do it, go bigger, go bigger,
exactly.
go bigger.
Like this was in the height of Jim Carrey mania, so he was like referencing other movies and stuff.
Yeah.
I did write down at one point, I was like, is this a movie or a fucking fever dream?
Yeah. I think that's ultimately like part of why I enjoy it.
Yeah, no, and like it wasn't like a bad thing. Like in fact, it's kind of a good thing, but it is a weird thing for sure.
Yeah, for me at the end of the day, like, you know, how many forgettable Christmas movies, how many forgettable kids movies are out there, but like this is just like, it's interesting. Like it's gonna make an impression because it's like unique. And I don't know, I to this day kind of stand by the fact that it's still fun. Oh, I just found something in my notes that I should have mentioned earlier, but you were talking about Tim Burton. Apparently for a while, Tim Burton was considered to direct this. So maybe that has something, like maybe he was working on it at some point and there's some little Tim Burton touches or something like that. But
overall, I mean, it's very Suess though, is the look. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I think it's just that Tim Burton, and I bet would say that he was influenced by Dr. Seuss. I can almost guarantee that.
I believe it,
just from the way that his stuff looks. Yeah. But I think that's where the similarity comes from, because Seuss has those like everything's twisted and warped and rounded and kind of off. And that's kind of how Burton can often be.
Now you're making me think of like Dr. Caligari, like sort of like old German expressionism stuff that's like very much like playing with like perspective and stuff. But then like, maybe that's
I don't know what that is, but
Seuss may have been. I mean, didn't you say Seuss was German?
Yeah,
maybe he was influenced by German expressionism. I mean, he would have been right around the time. It was right. Well, maybe not. I think it was probably like the 30s or so. Anyway. German expressionism is like what led to things like Dracula and like sort of like, like when you see like over exaggerated cathedral shots and things like that are very shadowed and all this kind of thing. I think we've talked about German expressionism before when we like noir, like eventually noir would be influenced by German expressionism. And
was it when we were doing Fahrenheit 451 maybe? I know we were talking about some of that stuff.
No, that was French New Wave stuff. But
that's what it was.
Yeah.
That's what I was thinking of. Never mind.
I can't remember. We had to have talked about it at some point.
I have a couple other just random observations to this movie that I've got written down here that I might as well get in.
Yeah, go for it.
So first off, I thought it was funny that Jim Carrey's Grinch breaks the fourth wall a lot, reminiscent of maybe like a Deadpool or somebody. He like talks to the audience quite a bit, which I thought was kind of fun. In this weird movie, you have him like turning and talking to the camera. It felt very aware of the audience in that way, like very kind of like it knows what it is. There was a lot of lines that I feel like, even though I hadn't seen the movie, I've heard referenced a million times. And it's funny because you feel like they're Grinch quotes, but they're actually not like referencing any other version. It's like, I think they were new to this version. And it was just a lot of stuff I'd heard a bunch.
I got to ask you about a certain moment. Did you, the echo moment where he's like, I'm an idiot. It's like, you're an idiot.
Yeah.
Did that get you?
You're an idiot, yeah. Yeah, it was kind of funny.
It's just like, it's pretty funny, man. I still to this day, the first time I saw that when I was a kid, I repeated it endlessly.
That's when I wrote the thing about the fever dream, because he was sitting there eating glass and conversing with his own echo.
Yeah.
And I was like, this is a fucking weird movie. So speaking of, I wrote on a specific, isn't there like a scene, it's been a long time since I've seen it, but isn't there a scene in Ace Ventura where he does a conga line?
I'm sure. That just seems like a thing that
because he does a conga line here, and I was like, I've seen Ace Ventura do like a crazy over the top conga line before in another movie.
Yeah.
And I felt like that was a reference to that. It's interesting because they position the Grinch here as like a victim of bullying, essentially, as his origin story, right? But it's all related to him shaving and being hairy. And so I think you could also read in as this sort of being like a puberty story, right? And about like the fear of being bullied over puberty and like all this stuff. And it's also about like his first love and Martha and being ridiculed about it. And it puts him, up on the mountain and as this curmudgeon. I don't know. I mean, it works pretty well. I don't know that the Grinch needs all that backstory, but if you're going to make a 2-hour movie, like, you're going to have to do it. That's kind of where it makes sense to go, right? So it was fine. The movie overall was pretty fun, with I like the pipe that they would all hop in to like somehow go up the mountain, but they always made sure to show them having like a great time. Yes. Otherwise it was like, it seemed like it wouldn't be fun.
Yeah. The dog was doing it at one point. I'm like, how are we going to like, I kept thinking like, is this going to cross the line? And I was always like just close enough to where I was like,
oh, speaking of, the dog was super fucking cute.
Yes. Yeah.
And there was a one point where he does do the whip. When he's like at his worst, right? When he's stolen all the gifts and he's going up the mountain. But for the most part, he treated the dog a lot better. And I loved Max here. I love that they used a real dog. I thought they got a lot of good stuff out of this dog, which I know they can be very hard to work with on set. It looked like maybe they added some fake ears. I wasn't sure. But man, that single horn and the little red nose, looks super good, cute. I want to put one of those on my dog now. Yeah, very cute. Yeah, tie it with some red string.
Apparently, that they were thought about doing a CG dog, and like for 2001, I'm sure it wouldn't have looked great. So. Well, there was a moment of CG when the dog's eyes popped real big when it put its ass on the mayor's face or whatever. I forgot about that. Jesus,
fucking weird movie.
Weird.
I love it though. I don't know. It was enjoyable. What can I say? Even though it was something else, it did feel like the movie begrudgingly ended the way it did. It really felt like this version of the Grinch did not want to come around.
Really?
Did you get that sense?
I always felt like the moment when he flipped, like, because he cares about Cindy Lou, he doesn't give a shit about anybody else. Like, he clearly cares about her, and I think that's what I got. But whereas, like, he comes to like everybody in the other versions. In this version, I think like he saved Cindy Lou and then was like, I guess I got to roll with it.
Yeah, he's still a stinker at the end, Yeah. Which they make clear, and I think that's their way of doing it. He does early on in the movie get kind of meta, where he says something about like, it can't end with people coming to love Christmas. That's too cliche or something. Like, he has a line like that, right? So again, it's that fourth wall breaking. It's self-referential because we know that that's where the story's going. And then at the end, it was kind of resistant. Interesting enough, I read that Dr. Seuss said that was the thing he struggled with the most, actually, was that he felt like the ending was kind of trite. And so he worked a lot at like trying to earn it. But he said otherwise he wrote the story. It was like the fastest story he ever wrote. But then the ending he struggled with because he felt like it was a little overly trite. Anyway, and I think the movie might feel the same way.
I was going to say, to avoid this episode seeming a little trite, let's get our final thoughts in. Do you have anything else you want to say about the 2000 film or I guess Dr. Seuss in general?
Well, I don't know if I mentioned this earlier, but Dr. Seuss is not a doctor. He took it on as his pen name when he was in college. He wrote he wrote humorous stuff, I think, for the paper, for like a college paper. And then I think it was banned, and he went on to continue to publish in it as his pseudonym, Dr. Seuss. He did try and get a PhD, but I think he dropped out of the PhD program. But yeah. And apparently people have theorized that this may have inspired people like Dr. Dre to nice. Adapt that moniker. I don't know if that's true at all. I don't know, yeah. But I saw that out there. But yeah, I don't have anything else for the movie. I do want to, wish everybody happy holidays, Merry Christmas if you celebrate it. We do. We're going to be enjoying ourselves down in Florida. Hopefully having a good time. We hope everybody does as well. I'm going to just shout out all of our patrons. Mm-hmm. Thank you guys all for supporting us this year. We'll talk more on our Last Looks episode, but we really appreciate the ongoing support. If you want to get access to that Watchmen episode that's coming out, just go to patreon.com/ink2film. You can find all of our former bonus content. I think we're like getting close to 20 now. Bonus episodes out there covering a variety of topics. And that would be a nice little Christmas present for yourself and for us, so we'd love to get a few more patrons before the year's out.
Yeah.
That'd be great.
Thank you to all of our patrons. Seriously, you guys are the best. Connect with us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. All of those adding to film. And join the Council of Inklings because we post polls like this one for the Grinch that we posted. The people in the group basically decided that we would be covering the 2000 film. We also post news about upcoming adaptations or anything else we see, so definitely check that place out.
Yeah, and leave us a rating and review on whatever podcatcher, I don't know whatever you call it, whatever app you use. If you have the ability to leave a rating and review, we appreciate that. They help us get the word out, which, again, is one of our biggest struggles as a smaller podcast, is just getting people to know about us.
Yeah. Thank you to Jennifer Delazana for providing our transcripts, and that's going to be it for this episode. It was fun covering the Grinch, kind of nostalgic.
Absolutely.
Looking forward to the Last Looks episode. We're going to be covering that next week. We're going to talk about everything we've covered up to this point, the whole year.
Yeah.
Best things, worst things, all kinds of things.
Yeah,
I'm really
absolutely.
looking forward to it.
Yeah, me too, man. And those kind of relaxed fit episodes are very fun. Easier for us to produce, and I think a lot of fun. Hopefully everybody enjoys it as much as we do making it. So yeah, look for that at the end of the year. But until next time.
Thanks for listening.